Okay, so we talked about the fact that we've done things through our um, prompt so far, but now let's do some actions actually on our page so we can get our page interaction. The first thing we want to do is be able to link to more than one web page, right? Because it's common for us to, when we're on a page, to go to from one page to another and back again. So let's start with that, and we're going to use a element in HTML called the anchor tag. I'm just going to type A and hit enter, and you'll see it fills all this in for me. A is the tag name. href is the attribute where we're going to fill in the name of our next page. We're going to call this page calc.html. Now, calc.html doesn't exist yet, so let's come over here and let's create it. Now it exists. And actually, if we go back to index and we come down to our anchor tag here and we take this out, you could see that now if I start typing calc, it'll appear right there. And then with anchor tags, what we fill in here is actually going to be the link. So we're going to call this tip calculator. Okay, and let's go ahead and save that and refresh over here, and let's see what that looks like. And you'll notice we now have a link to tip calculator that when we click on, it brings us to this HTML, which is a blank page right now. So let's fix that. If I go ahead and say doc type, and I say HTML, and I say head, and we're gonna give this a title, and we're gonna call this tip calculator. And we want to reference a style sheet. Generally, that's a good idea. So we'll do a link here. And it already knows I'm probably going to want to reference a style sheet. I'm just going to have it reference the same style sheet. That's fine. You could do a different one if you wanted to for this page and make it different than the last one. And we're also going to add a body. So let's do that. And in our body, we want to make sure we can link back to our last page. So we're going to do an href, and we're going to have it go back to index.html. And let's go ahead and make sure we know that this is our tip calculator. So we'll do an h1 of tip calculator. And we'll just start there. That'll be our whole body right now. Let's do Command S, make sure everything's saved. We'll go ahead and reload, and there we have tip calculator. Our href won't work because we didn't actually put any text in there. There we go. Our anchor tag won't work. Okay, so now we have that. We can click home. It brings us back here. We can hit tip calculator, and now we can navigate between our two pages. Pretty cool. It's starting to feel like a real web page. Now, this link says index.html only because in our web development folder, these are all at the same level. One of the things we could do is, let's say we wanted to keep all of the tip calculator page stuff together. We could call this tip calc as a folder, and we could move this in here. We could also come in here and give it its own style sheet. That would be fine. We could give it its own JavaScript. And because we're in a different folder, we can even use the same names. Not generally a good idea, but we could if we wanted to. So now, when this HTML references something, now it's going to reference this style sheet as opposed to the previous style sheet. If I hit Command S and I refresh this, now when I go to tip calculator, it's not going to work. Why is it not going to work? Well, because this link no longer works, because calc HTML is not at the same file level as everything else. So we have to change this. So let's see what Visual Code suggests. It suggests I use this folder and I use calc HTML. And now, Command S, you can see that I can include my folder structure. Let's go back, let's refresh, and now we can go to our tip calculator. And you'll notice tip calculator is no longer in blue because now it's using this style sheet instead of this style sheet that changed my H1 tag to blue. But what about going home? Well, home still doesn't work because this no longer references anything at this file level. So how do I get to a higher level folder if I'm inside a folder now? Right? I can't get to index.html. It doesn't want to find it. So let's go ahead and look. See what we can find out. Navigating from page to page in parent folder. Let's say href. Okay. Excuse me. Excuse me. You'll notice, and I started typing this before I stopped myself. The current folder is .. but the parent folder is actually .. So if we do .. you'll notice the parent folder now comes up and we can select index. I don't know if you caught me doing that before I stopped myself and said, let's look it up, but that's what I was doing. All right, let's hit cancel. Let's come over here, Command S. Let's come back over here. Let's go back. Let's go home. And now we have navigation between our two pages. Likewise, we could have put our index in its own folder, but generally it's not a bad idea that if you're going to make different pages, go ahead and separate them out by folder. Just a good organization method. If you need to go to a parent folder, that's what the web development folder is called. You can use .. If you need to go to a child folder, that's what TipCalc is called. You can just write the folder name / and then the file that you want. Okay. Now, what I really want to talk about on TipCalc is let's stop doing interactions with prompts. Let's instead build ourselves an interaction on the page. And we're going to do that using a new tag called form. Okay. We're going to leave the action for a second because we're really just going to build our form elements. And form elements typically consist of two different pieces. There is a label element. We're going to leave that blank for 1 second. And let's go ahead and say our label is bill amount. And then there is an input element, and the type of input we want could be text. There are other options. You can see we have all these different inputs we can put in. In fact, in this case, let's go ahead and input number. Label, do another one. We'll call this tip %. And we'll do an input. We'll do another number. And finally, we'll leave it at that for right now. Let's see what that looks like. Command S. Come over here. We're going to hit tip calculator. And here we have bill amount. I can enter 100. % amount. I can enter 20. Hit enter. Nothing happens yet, but that sort of builds our form for us. Now, that's not the nicest looking. So if you want to kind of start thinking about how you might organize these things, one of the things you can put in here is a break using this BR. And this should produce a line break for us. Let's see if that's right. There we go. And that'll give us a little bit more space. Still not the prettiest thing in the world, but it's starting. Now, let's go ahead and give these labels. We're going to call this bill amount. We're going to call this tip %. And I hope you can kind of imagine where I'm starting to go with this, right? Now we can write things in here and possibly get them out of here using JavaScript. Let's go ahead and do a little bit of research on this. So if I wanted to get info from form HTML JavaScript, and I go to, we can use Stack Overflow. That should be fine. So here's what the JavaScript says. Document.getElement by ID. This seems really familiar. My form. Add event listener. Submit. And then a function where we're passing in something. And then we've got some information happening here. This is a little bit complex. But generally, this is the kind of code we're going to use for our input. So the first thing we want to do is give our form. Let's go ahead and give our form an ID. And we'll call our form tip calc form. And that's going to give us a reference to this whole form element inside of our JavaScript. Let me see. I want to see. Let's see if this is okay. Good. So here is the HTML for our form as our as they have it set up here in their form. They also have this input type submit at the bottom, which is the way that you can produce. So input and the type is submit and the value is submit, which is just what it's going to look like. And when we load this, let's command save, let's refresh, you'll notice it adds this nifty little submit button, which is really helpful. We're going to use that in a second. We can also add values to these inputs if we wanted to, value. And what this is going to do is just give us like a starting value. So we could say 100. We could add value 20. And actually, I don't think. Oh, I guess those do have to be in quotes. Let's do command S. I don't know if those are quotes or if we do want them in numbers. Let's see what this looks. Okay, that looks good. So it does give you starting values if you want. You don't have to have those, obviously, but it will give you a place to start. Let's go back and look at our example. So this looks pretty good from our example standpoint as to what we want. Interesting enough, they have it label. They have their input right inside their label. I haven't seen that construction before. We'll have to think about that. Let's go and look at their JavaScript now. So now they've produced this function. We'll worry about that in a second. But look what they've got here. Document, get element by ID, their form, and then they're doing this add event listener submit, and they're calling this function. And then they're passing in this information. We're not going to worry about functions just yet, but let's go ahead and see if we can't at least get some information out of our event, out of our form by using some JavaScript. So remember, in our thing here, we want to make sure we add our script element, and that we're going to reference a source, and our source here is going to be script.js. Let's go into our script.js and let's start typing some of this up. So we know we want to reference the document. We're going to get element by ID, and the ID we are using is the ID for our form. So let's go back into our calc, and what did I use? I used tip calc form. So I'm actually just going to copy that and put tip calc form there. The next thing I want to do, though, is I want to add an event listener, and this is a really important concept. Event listeners are ways in which we can ask our page to pay attention to something happening. And forms have a special event called a submit event, okay? Which is why we added that little submit element at the end there. And then with events, what we're going to do is we're going to tell it to do something once we have an event. And the way we do that in JavaScript is we say, we want you to call a function. And when you call that function, you're going to go ahead and pass in, and I put it as E. That's E in this case is actually short for event. That's what that's saying there. Let me close this down a little bit. Let me shrink this down. We actually don't need this example anymore. We're gonna look at this. So where's my scroll bar? There we go. Scroll over. So we have document.getElement by ID, we're getting the form, and we're listening for the submit button. Once the submit button happens, inside of these curly braces, we want to tell it what we want to do. So let's look at our event object that we're getting passed into this. Event objects have all of these kind of properties to them. Different things you can kind of look at inside of your event object. You've got bubbles, cancelable, a whole bunch of stuff. including an event. Okay. But what we want, hold on, let me bring that back up because I want to see something quickly. Let's grab this. Okay, so e.prevent default is the first thing they do. Okay. I'm not going to go through the explanation of that right now. That's fine. But then I want to look up here to what they do. So what they do is they actually take the form. Okay, e-target is the form, and they pull apart the form data into a form data type. I wonder where they define their form data type. That's a little more complex than we want to do. Let's just go ahead and we're going to say event dot target dot, and let's go ahead. Let's see what happens when we console.log this. Sometimes the best way to sort of debug and work on code is just to log things and see kind of what happens. I want to see exactly what kind of information we get out of this. So let's refresh our tip calculator. Let's hit submit. Let's inspect. And let's see in our console what we get. Okay, great. So we get, this is the information we actually get inside this target. Do you see all this information here? We get what's kind of inside of our form. We actually get our form back to us as HTML. And if we change these values, we would get the form again. Oh, but we don't get the new values. We just get the form. That's interesting. Let's see what else we can get out of target. Target. Event dot. See what this says. Current target. So one of the things we can do is look at the reference for target and see what it has inside of it. Okay, the read-only target property of event interface is a reference to the object onto which the event was dispatched. It is different from the event current topic when the event handler is called during the bubbling or capturing phase of the event. Can be used in order to implement an event delegation. So let's see. So that's about the so how does this differ from current event? Current target. Let's go ahead and see. Command S. Refresh. Submit. Okay, and if I change these values, do we get the new values? No. See, they keep putting it into a form data type, which is fine, but I didn't want to have to deal with form data types right now. I just wanted to get access to the entries without form data. Let's see. Oh, I guess we could do each individual input type. That might be another way of doing it rather than doing the whole form. That probably makes sense. Okay. Okay, let's do this. Once we get a submit, let's go ahead and go back to the document. Get element by ID. Let's go back to our HTML. Let's give our inputs an ID. We're going to call this, it doesn't really matter how you order the attributes, by the way. ID. No, why did it change type to ID? Wait, command ID equals. Okay, and we're going to call this bill amount. And we're going to give you an ID. And we're going to call you tip percent. Okay. So now when our, going back to our script, now when this is hit, we can actually go get those values by their IDs. We have bill amount. And we can say get that value. And one of the things we want to do is go ahead and save that to a variable. So we'll say let bill amount equal. Good. I'm going to close this file so I can get a little more space here. And then we're going to say let tip percent equal document dot get element by ID. Typing in tip percent dot value. And then let's just console.log. Make sure we're getting what we think we should be getting. Okay. Command S. Go back to our page, refresh, submit. Oh yeah, and you can see it's popping up there for a second. And if we change these values, we see the new values too. Perfect. Excellent. Okay. So that's actually working. It's constantly, it's logging those new amounts. So now what we can do is actually use this function to make a tip calculator here on the page by adding another element to our page. After our form, let's go ahead and add a, we'll call it an H1. And we'll say your total bill is. And for now, we'll start it off with just like a blank underscore. But in our script, oh, we need to give it an ID so we can get access to it. So let's give this an ID, and we'll call this total output. And we'll go to our script, and we'll say let total equal document dot get element by ID. We called it total output. And we can go total dot, well, first we want to do some math with our bill percentage, right? So we want to say let total equal, or let total bill equal bill amount plus bill amount times, in parentheses, tip percent divided by 100. And then we can say let our total, right, dot inner text equals, and we can do some string interpolation, right? Your total bill is $, squiggly bracket, total bill. All right, let's see what this looks like. We did a lot of coding there, but let's see if this works. Let's refresh. We see our how it starts. We hit submit. Oh, interesting. Okay, so a couple things are happening, and I hope you're noticing. It's treating our output still like text, because these are kind of text fields. So we're getting 120, which is the string concatenation version of this. So what we want to really do is set these to numbers. Right, we've done this before. Number. Okay, let's Command S. Refresh our page. We actually don't need our console anymore. We can hit submit. And we're getting the right answer, but it's only staying for a second. It's not staying changed. I wonder why that is. So let's go and let's do a little research. Why is form submit not keeping changes? Let's go. Let's make sure we're telling it that we want to do this in JavaScript. It's not really answering. Our page is kind of refreshing. I forgot our prevent default. That's what I did. Or we had this last time. Event, prevent default. I need that. Okay. I forgot it. I didn't realize I had deleted it. That should do it. That should prevent the refreshing from happening. Let's try it now. There we go. Done. And now we can change it again to 200 and we will do 30%. Beautiful. Perfect. And now we have a working tip calculator that we can use right here on the page and not have to do any prompts or do any working in the console. And even when we get ugly numbers, it's not too bad. Although, I bet you if we made really ugly numbers, let's see what happens here. I think because we're doing numbers, it wants it as an integer. Let's try... Oh, it's doing 2 digits. Not bad. Okay. Looks pretty good. And obviously, we could do more to make this look nice. We could add a $sign here. Oh, that's interesting. Maybe I didn't save it. There it is. And we can get a little bit of a $sign. You could change some colors around, make this look real nice. Okay, so I have made a tip calculator here that edits the HTML and actually does all the work. The most new code here that you really haven't seen before is all of this stuff with the get element ID add event listener. We've gotten elements by ID before. We're just referencing the value of that particular element, in this case, whatever is entered in here and here. But this piece is just adding some functionality to an event, and that event is this hitting of this submit button, which we can see is set up by this little input right here. Okay. All right. There's a lot here. Go through it carefully and go ahead and really replicate the tip calculator that I've done here and turn that in. So no skill check today, but I do want to see your work on this calculator, and go ahead and do any changes to it that you want to sort of make it your own. You can mess around with the style sheet to kind of make things look good. Maybe have this change color depending on how much it is, so on and so forth. All right. Good luck.